Hey guys, Stephanie here. In today's video, I'm going to take you guys along as I inoculate mushrooms, and we're just going to talk about what may be coming, how do we prepare for it. I also want to dive into the health benefits and all the medicinal properties of mushrooms and how they can be such an important part of your diet, and just give you guys some updates. But first, let's dive into what's growing on the harvest wall because it is so incredible. So the harvest wall is a hybrid hydroponic system, and the towers are a hybrid hydroponic system as well. So true hydroponics, the water is like in an NFT system. It's flowing full time. These tend to be horizontal. They take up a lot of space. Totally great option for growing food, but not feasible. It's something I looked into originally. It just wasn't feasible for my space. I didn't want to have something that was that complicated, that I don't know how to describe it. The water's moving all the time. You have to deal with different things than you have to deal with in these hydroponic systems. So in these hydroponic systems, both the towers and the harvest wall, they are vertical, so you get to grow a ton more food in a smaller space. And these aren't running full time. These beautiful roots, and they just grow the plants. I'm using Tower Garden nutrients in this right now. I am going to switch to more hydroponic nutrients, I think, eventually, but right now this is working and it's what I have, so that's what I'm using. And these you're growing in a medium. So this one is cocoa coir with some worm casings. I have my own worms. I'm going to make a whole video on worm composting. That is something anybody can do in any space, whether you're in an apartment or on a homestead. And I have my big hat on today because it's actually sunny and we've got a couple of days of nice weather, and then it's going to turn on us. But that leads me to my next exciting news. I am changing the name of this channel to Alternative Homesteading. One of you guys suggested this as a name. I loved all the suggestions, but when it came down to it, like, that's what I'm passionate about, educating you on ways to grow your own food, no matter what space you are in. I have so many of you guys that are customers who live in apartments. It's been fun to watch your journey of starting with one tower, growing to more, and then now some of you have moved on to looking at land or moving out and moving into a smaller homestead option that's not an apartment. Today it's beautiful out, and I get to go inoculate mushroom logs and be outside, and it's enjoyable and it's not overwhelming, even though I have a lot to do, and I get to grow this abundance of food in any space. I mean, I've got access to grow radishes year round, not just in season. Radishes at our grocery store for organic radishes were $3.95 for one bundle. It's insane. And so we can grow our own year round and save a ton of money and have access to beautiful fresh food. And so we're going to dive into how do you homestead in any space using simple, sustainable systems that you can use in any space. And so that's the goal moving forward. I hope you guys like the name change. I am launching a podcast this year as well. And part of what I'm going to be doing on this channel is also not just showing you what I'm doing, but I'm going to start doing some tours, maybe once or twice a month, of other homesteads or other people who are growing food in alternative ways so that we can expand our knowledge vastly, right? I do a lot here, and I do a lot in a very small space. And really, guys, most of you, even if you're in an apartment, if you have a spare bedroom, if you have a garage, you can do a lot of the things I'm doing, even at the same level, in a small space. And that's the cool thing about growing food in alternative ways. It can be done. I actually don't really understand how the homestead movement got to be so complicated, to be honest. And I really want to bring it back to a simpler place. And so one of the homesteaders I follow, her name is Jess from Roots and Refuge Farm. You guys may follow her. Amazing channel. She does such beautiful work. And she always says, turn your waiting room into a classroom. Meaning, like, you want a homestead and you can learn while you're waiting to get your homestead. And, you know, I was just thinking about that concept, and I love the concept of that, but I also want to expand that because not everybody wants to have a giant homestead. I do not want gardens as big as hers. It looks like so much work. Like, I'm not interested in that. I want to grow a ton of food using microsystems that feed us year round, that don't require huge amounts of work and land and space and all of those things for me personally. These beauties. And I want the work to be simple, but I also need it to produce a ton of food, like these peppers. And so how do we do that? And that's what we're going to talk about on this channel moving forward. I also believe in preparedness. I believe the world is changing, and it's going to be changing drastically from 2025 to 2030. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we prepare our mushroom logs. And that's the other reason I want to have ways to grow food that are compact and easy and can be done in any space and don't require a lot of inputs. For the things that I grow here in the towers and for my harvest wall, I just stockpile those. I keep a year's supply. I'm working on a little bit more than that so that if we get in a situation where there's an emergency, I just have the things we need, because no one in this generation is truly sustainable. And even in the homesteading space, if anything, I feel like that's almost even more unsustainable in traditional homesteading, because the minute you don't have access to animal feed, animal minerals, animal medicines, freezers, power to run your freezers, like when those resources are gone, all of those systems will collapse very, very quickly, because we are not living like the Amish where we have systems in place. Like no one I know around here is growing animal feed. They're just growing animals and buying the feed. We're just going to dive into how do you use what you have to grow the most amount of food as possible, if that's what you want, or how do you grow a little bit of food using some systems in whatever space you are to gain just a little bit of independence from the grocery store. Any level is fine. Homesteading doesn't have to just be for those who have a lot of space. All right, we're gonna dive in to the mushrooms. Okay, now I have a full video course coming out on how to do this. So I'm not gonna really be diving into the how-to. We're just gonna have a little conversation as I do some of these simple homesteading chores. Really focusing in on why I grow mushrooms, the health benefits of mushrooms, what I think is coming in 2025 and what I like to prepare for, and just all the things. So this is my mushroom spawn from North Spore. They sent me a ton of it, and most of them are starting to actually produce mushrooms because it's been so warm. We actually got a lot of rain, and there's mushrooms growing on the logs I already have out in the yard, and so it's great. It's perfect shiitake weather. It's like 60 and moist, but it is going to be turning super cold. So you can see they're already, that's them trying to become mushrooms. So moving forward, we'll be discussing on ways to grow food in any space, how to prepare that food, natural medicines, all the things that help us to become more sustainable in an unsecure world. And I think it's really interesting. People, prepping or preparedness has become like a hobby. And so then it makes it where it can be viewed as a hobby. But this is how people lived before. Like no other generation up until the last couple ever relied on someone else to feed them. They relied on community to get things done, but they never relied on a grocery store. So it's just funny how we've gotten to a place where this is viewed as a hobby and going to the grocery store is viewed as the norm, and almost living a prepared life is almost like mocked or looked down upon as like fear mongering or whatever it may be. I just find that super interesting. So what I'm doing right now is I'm using what's called a plunger, and I'm putting my spawn in there, and then I'm putting it into the holes here. And again, we'll talk about that in the course, all the details on how to do this. It's super simple, and this is true food security. But mushrooms are also really interesting because certain ones like shiitake and lion's mane, those are mushrooms that are considered medicinal in that they have lots of medicinal properties. Neurological support being one of them, especially lion's mane. There's all sorts of studies on lion's mane for helping to regenerate neurological connections in the brain. shiitake as well. These have medicinal properties, but they're also just food you put on the table, so they replace the grocery store. Some mushrooms are just medicinal, like reishi mushroom. You can't just bite into that and turn it into a meal. That's something that you have to turn into a tincture or a powder or a tea. So there's lots of different ways to use mushrooms, and then some, like oyster mushrooms, are more food-based, but they still have medicinal properties too. They're just not as medicinal as, let's say, like shiitake or lion's mane. But the cool thing with mushrooms too, they are a complete source of protein, which means they have all the amino acids intact. So when you consume them, they are helping to be building blocks, like true building blocks in the body. So there's this big, you know, got to eat a ton of protein movement. But really, if you're eating the right proteins, too much protein actually becomes toxic in the body. So when we eat the right proteins, the ones that are complete amino acids, we get all the benefits without any toxicity from them. They are a natural source and the only plant-based source of vitamin D. When you expose them to sun, they actually synthesize UV. Tony, you want to come mushroom log? It's my husband, Tony. He has YouTube as well. What is your channel? HVAC TV.
That's right, yeah.
We're mushroom logging.
I've got the Not Fun Nerd channel.
The Not Fun Nerd channel.
That's right, air conditioning.
Yeah.
It's looking good, honey.
Thanks. So they synthesize UV light similar to humans. They take it in and turn it into vitamin D. And so when you eat mushrooms that have been exposed to the sun, you get vitamin D, which is amazing. Especially if you're plant-based, because that's not, I think it's the only source of vitamin D available in a plant form, pretty sure. So those are some benefits. Low in calorie, they're amazing. I'll be sharing some recipes moving forward and how I use them. I have a 12-day smoothie cleanse coming up, and I'm going to be making a soup for the evenings or to fill any times when I feel like I can't handle just smoothies. And I use mushrooms blended as a base in that. I'll be sharing all of that in the cleanse. If you're interested, I'll put a link to that below. It starts January 6th, and on January 1st, I'm going to start announcing and teaching in the Facebook group. It's done through Facebook. It's a Facebook Live. I blend mushrooms all the time in our soups and in our meals to add that protein source and all the medicinal properties. It's just amazing. Mushrooms are so great. And they're a great way to homestead. I'm gonna have so many logs, guys. If you saw how many logs I have to do, I have a lot of work ahead of me. But even the last couple of years, I've only had about 20 logs going at one time, and that has provided us with so much food. They just produce and produce and produce. Now, if you want to have access to mushrooms full time, then I also recommend growing indoors, and I use a boom room 2 grow tent. I have videos on that, and I'll be making more. So I will be growing any excess spawn that doesn't go into the logs. Those are going into my boom room 2 tonight to turn into shiitake mushrooms. So I can stock up some. I'm kind of low on my mushroom stock. So those are all the reasons why I grow them. Food security, health purposes, complete proteins. They're just amazing. Now, there's a lot of chatter on what's coming in 2025. So I thought I would just share some of my thoughts on that. Drop in the comments what you think. Is anything coming? I have no idea. I think we should always be prepared as if something is coming. But I will tell you my general thoughts. So, a couple of things. We all know, like, our financial debt situation is out of control. Out of control. Inflation is out of control. It costs more to eat organic, healthy food than people can afford. So instead of being able to afford healthy food, even if it's not organic, we're at a point where it is less expensive to go to a McDonald's than someone to go to Walmart and buy their family healthy foods on the outer perimeter aisles. And then in those outer perimeter aisles, there's so many things wrong with the food. The meat, all of it is just incredibly out of control. And it's all been designed to be profitable, to feed the masses at the lowest cost possible with the highest profitability. Okay, so that's how it's set up. Also, to benefit the producers of chemicals, fertilizers, medicines, all of those things come first. So they're all in it together to get all of those products into the food, then to make the food addictive, and then they put it out there. And the most addictive, most harmful stuff is the least expensive, and the healthy stuff is the most expensive. That's insane if you think about it. It's complete insanity. But we know, like, control the food, you control the people. And that's what's happened. We handed over control, and we did it all for the sake of convenience. I've shared this before, and I'm not just talking about us, but other generations ahead before us. And this is where we're at right now. And the real problem too is they continue to do things to our food systems without our consent. So now we know they're gene editing using CRISPR technology, greens. Nowhere on the package does it say that it's been edited using CRISPR technology. You just buy the lettuce in the little package, and nowhere does it say that on there. We've got chemicals being sprayed on our food, our produce. Like when your produce, I was looking at organic produce at our grocery store the other day, and it was all wet because those misters, well, a lot of those misters are pumping out a chemical, almost, it's in the bleach family, to sterilize those greens so they last, to sterilize that produce so it doesn't go bad and it lasts longer. We've got things like a peel that can be put on organic foods, a coating that means you can be eating an avocado that's 5 months old. That's not going to go bad because it has this substance on it. The problem is the substance, you can't wash it off. There's no way to get rid of it. You can't cleanse it off. I get that question all the time. What do you wash your vegetables with? I don't. I just grow them myself because it's too complicated to find. Or you need to find local sources. I buy a lot from food co-ops. I've got a couple of cases of oranges and grapefruit coming in that are coming from a food co-op situation where we know the farms, and so they're fresh harvested. That kind of stuff, you just have to, if you can get a hold of it, you eat it when you can. And then we have to eat other things different times of the year. I've tried to buy apples recently because I like to juice, and every single one of them feels coated with something. And it doesn't say anywhere on the package that it's coated, and that's even organic. They're almost slimy and greasy feeling, which a peel is like a fat lipid-based thing that's actually really not healthy. And it can be unorganic again. So we don't have any consent. They're talking about MR, I'm not going to say the whole thing because it'll get flagged, technology used in lettuce. That's crazy. Nowhere does it say on the lettuce that could be in there. And actually Tennessee, the council people, city council, there was a hearing in Tennessee with the government officials. I don't know what you call those meetings. City council meeting, not city council. There was a council meeting where they wanted to make sure any lettuce or greens using that technology were labeled as a farm product, not farm, F-A-R-M, but the PH kind, because they know it's happening and nowhere on there is it being shared. Like when you have to have a hearing to say we want those things labeled, that tells you they're already doing it, which is another issue. By the time we hear these things, they've already been done and tested most likely. So I've shared before, like what's coming with Agenda 2030. Over the next 5 years, we are going to see some insanely dramatic changes to AI and technology. It's about to ramp up dramatically. huge, huge change. And it's going to change everything. It's going to change food as foods become more lab grown. I do think we're going to see more natural foods hitting the market and higher standards, but they're going to become more unaffordable because that's just the reality. We have so many people to feed. I mean, right now, a lot of the beef comes from other countries. It's filled with things. It's filled with dyes to make it last, and gases and ammonias. All of that is to make it where people can eat the amount they've been eating at an affordable price. So, you know, all of this stuff with RFK, yes, it's great. It's going to drive, which has always been those who've kind of followed this movement. How do you shut down the food systems? You make them so good that people can't afford them. And a lot of people can't afford organic grass-fed beef. It costs 3 times as much at the grocery store, 2 to 3 times. And the stuff that's only 2 times is not really grass-fed, like quality grass finished. They're just like dumping grass on the cow's head instead of just grain. Like, they're not letting them graze out in the wild. They're growing grass, cutting it, and dumping it in as feed. How are they growing that grass? Who knows? What chemicals are being used to grow it? We don't know because they don't tell us these things. And they don't have to tell us these things, which is the real crazy part. So all of that, AI is going to be super advanced. It is going to start replacing a lot of jobs, which can mess with the economy. We've got all the insecurity with wars and rumors of wars. Lots of concern about financial collapse. I personally don't think there'll be a full collapse, like a Venezuela type thing. I think it'll be a soft shift into a digital currency, and then everything can be tracked, and you can have carbon tax and all of those things, limits on what you can buy as far as how much meat consumption, all of those things. What I believe are part of Agenda 2030, based on what I've read, and it says in there that's what it is, are coming. And so this is a hedge of protection against those things. It's a hedge of protection if, as we go into transitions, if things get a little bit rocky, you never want to have to put yourself in a situation where you have to go out and get something. If there is some sort of pandemic situation, if there is a real collapse where society starts to fall apart, the last thing you want to do is get in the car and have to go to the grocery store. So these systems help us. This and preparedness. I'm going to take you guys on a pantry tour, my prepared pantry, soon. But with the fresh food and a prepared pantry, we don't have to leave. We have the things we need. And we watched things collapse very quickly here in Western North Carolina with this hurricane. The minute you couldn't buy things at the store and they only took cash and you couldn't get gas, like, it didn't take long for people to start. I have a friend who works for 911 dispatch. He said people were calling 911 by day 3 saying they were starving to death, because we live in a society that, first, in a lot of ways, can't afford excess food because of our economy, and food is so expensive. So you've got that. Or, you know, there were $1 million houses up on the mountain that they were having to drop water and supplies to out of helicopters. I find that to be the craziest thing ever. Like, how you could own $1 million home up on the mountain and have zero sustainability. It's irresponsible, really. I'm just gonna speak boldly about that. Like, we need to do better, because those are the people that should have the supplies to help the ones who can't afford to stock up. You and I, if you're watching this video, that might be you. You might have excess where you can prepare, and then you're able to help people in a crisis who can't help themselves. That's what we should be doing. So I think the fall is going to be a slow one in our country, and just the reason being that we have a lot of bang-bangs. We have a lot of independent-minded people in this country. And so when you're in somewhere like Venezuela, it can all collapse very quickly. Don't really have a way to fight back. So here we do. So I think here it's a soft fall where they make people feel comfortable and feel good about what's going on. Give them hope. Who said? Somebody said, if they need a hero, he was a 33rd. He was a Mason, and he said, if they need a hero, we'll give them a hero. If the people need a hero, we'll give them a hero. I think that's what's happened, because the people who are the most likely to fight back, well, they just got their hero, right? And that keeps people complacent. So I think it'll be a soft transition, more like a, hey, this is coming. There'll probably be a problem reaction solution, maybe a quick war, some sort of nuke goes off, something to scare people. And then the solution will roll in pretty quickly with switching over to a digital currency. So people accept it and feel like they've been given an option that is a good one. I think that is what will come financially. At what point, I have no idea. And then, you know, once we go to a digital currency, which other countries are already doing this, they just did this. I forget exactly which country. They just rolled it out. Was it Thailand? I think it's Thailand. Don't hold me to that. But they just did this. They took the poorest people in the country, the ones that are in desperate situations, and they offered them a digital currency wallet, gave them 6 months to spend the money, but there was a catch. A lot of people in that area weren't registered. Like we have our social security system, they weren't registered with any kind of system. And in order to get the money, you had to register. And then you get the money and you have to spend it within 6 months. What a brilliant way. It goes back to the food. Like you make the food so unaffordable. If you want to shut down the meat industry, which I don't eat meat, but I think when we shut down the industry, it's just another way to control people. I think if you eat meat, you should be connected to farmers and be buying quality meat. And if that means you can only eat it once a day, I think that's better than eating this meat bin with who knows what, and all of the antibiotics and all the terrible things that they put. Not to mention fat cells, store toxins. I talk about this in the cleanse that's coming up. Like, how do we detox effectively without all the terrible side effects? Because it can be very difficult, because as you lose weight, fat cells store toxins. It's the same in animals. So anything they're eating that's been exposed to whatever sprayed on the grass, which is a big common thing right now, and on the plants and on the grains they're being fed, and the genetically modified grains, all of that. The grass has a lot of PCBs in it because of the water that they water with, watering with biosludge as fertilizer, and then they're eating that stuff. All of that gets stored in the fat cells of the animals, and then you consume them. Now, why I can confidentially say something is coming is, for one, I mean, we can see it. It's already, they tell us every day. Like, there's no way you can have AI ramping up at the level it's going to over the next 5 years without it affecting the economy because of the job losses that are coming. We're talking about, like, I just listened to one the other day. It'll change the movie industry. It's going to change the content creator industry. Like commercials now, I don't know if you guys have seen them. Commercials are starting to be AI produced. I see them on my YouTube when I'm watching YouTube. I can tell they're AI produced because I've looked into what that looks like and I can recognize it. It won't be recognizable soon. It'll be really hard to tell what's real and what isn't, which makes it really easy to deceive the people. Also takes the jobs. You probably will get to a point where before you see a real doctor, you'll have to see an AI physician. So many jobs can be replaced with artificial intelligence, which leaves people like, I don't know, what is the plan for the people if it's all artificial intelligence? It's interesting. to think what will happen there. But I can say confidently, something is coming, and the reason is the Bible tells us so. I was talking to a friend once, and we were just like discussing inflation and the shock of inflation. And, you know, I was like, but why should we be surprised? It says eventually one day's labor will be worth a loaf of bread. Like, that's what inflation is going to eventually become. Will that be in our generation? Who knows? But we prepare now, just in case. And if it's not, then at least we've passed on these tools to younger generations so that they can be prepared for what's coming. The worst thing you can do is hand over all your power and put yourself in a place where you have to rely on someone else or some government official to take care of you. That's how we get into big, big trouble. Have extra spawn. They sent us so much, and I don't want it to go to waste. So the spawn that you use for your mushroom logs is actually the same stuff you grow in your grow tent. So if you grow in your grow tent, anything left over, you can spawn logs with. So you could do both, and I'll do some of that. I'll use the remnants of this to do the extra logs. But I want to go ahead, these are fruiting. They're wanting to make mushrooms because of our weather, and it's about to get really cold. And so I want to get them set up in here, let them fruit. And then, like I said, anything left over, I will then inoculate the logs with. But I have plenty out there still for now. So I'm just going to put some aspen shavings in. I have found that it helps with mold issues to put your bricks on a tray with a little bedding and take them completely out of the plastic. And it just keeps the moisture under control, and I have better results. These have also been sitting outside for a while because we were doing the mushroom logs, so they could be exposed to some molds or things, which is not that big of a deal. I just cut off any of that happens to grow. It's just like food molds. And if it does start to show up, I'll just cut that piece off and throw it away. But this does help. If I can get the bag open. All right, so you can grow oyster mushrooms in aspen shavings. It's a great way to grow your oyster mushrooms because you don't have to sterilize this like you're supposed to with straw. But you cannot grow, and what I mean is, like, you can take your spawn and put it outside in a garden bed or a pot covered and mixed with aspen, like your remnants of your oyster mushrooms, and they'll rebloom and they'll eat the aspen, but shiitakes won't. So we're just using it as a protective layer for bedding. And we're gonna make a mess in the process, but that's all right. All right, so we've got that. I'm gonna do 2 of those. I already have my boom room set up. It's got the humidity set on it, the timer, and so it's pumping out air. The temperatures are gonna drop dramatically, but this garage will stay at about 65, 67, and that's really perfect conditions for shiitake mushrooms. For my climate anyway. Okay, we've got those. Let's put this over here. So now, just gonna open my bags. You just hear that wind? We're going to deliver John, the man who slept in the chicken coop. We're delivering him shed, his bathroom shed. His house is not done, but his bathroom shed has a really good heater in it, and it actually still has a bunk bed because it was donated by another ministry, and it's kind of set up to be a tiny house. So that'll give him a warm place to stay because his camper is not set up for the weather we're about to have. It's coming tonight, snow and everything. It's actually warm right now though. All right, look at all of this. See how much it's wanting to produce? That is beautiful. That is a ton of food headed our way. So I'm just gonna set this right here. And I'm gonna do 2 per tray. Let's make 2025 an incredible year where we learn new skills, we do new things, and we put our health and our homes and our security at the top of our priority list and move away from the consumerism and the things that are so toxic to our bodies and our spirit and our minds. Because being outside, getting our hands a little bit dirty, growing our own food in any way we can, there is nothing more rewarding than that. All right, I'll see you guys on the next video.